Hello, hey, welcome to the channel, and here I am. I'm on top of Snaggy Ridge, and it is south of Caledonia State Park in south central Pennsylvania, just south of Route 30. I'm on a very back road, if you can see back here, and this is a little parking area that is associated with the top of this ridge. Now, I haven't been here in like 15 years. It's been a while. Um, and back a long time ago, I did a paper on this, actually in high school, and it was on the Snaggy Ridge Indian Rhyolite Quarries. Now, out across this ridge, for 11,000 years, the Indians mined a rock called Rhyolite, which is a volcanic metarhyolite that was created about volcanic about 600 million years ago. And Rhyolite had a lot of purposes when it came to making spearheads and other tools that they used on a regular basis because they were Stone Age people for the longest time until the Europeans showed up. And they also use them for arrowheads as the time progressed, which we will cover here later. Now, the issue with Snaggy Ridge, it is a ridge, so it makes it a lot easier to navigate because if you come off one side or the other, you're not going to, you can't get lost very easy because you're always going to be on the ridge. If you go south, you will come to this position. If you go north, you'll eventually fall off the edge of the ridge, and then you will wind up on Route 30. So it's very hard to get lost, but I have done it before here a long time ago. So I have come prepared, as the Boy Scouts always have as a motto. And I suggest if you come here too, that you also bring these tools, which I will show you right now. So I suggest when you come Snaggy Ridge or do a trip like this to always have some sort of navigational equipment. So I have right now, this is a GPS. I have it set with the marker where I am currently at so I can find my way back. But I don't always trust these kinds of things because it is faulty because you can run out of batteries. So thus, I brought extra batteries. I also brought a compass just in case I need it, and then a map of the Rhyolite mines or Snaggy Ridge in general, so I know where I'm going. So I'm going to pack my things up, put them in my backpack, and we're going to head out across the ridge and see what we can find. Now here's the gate to a road that goes back into Snaggy Ridge. It's pretty much closed, and it only goes for a short distance if I recall. We're going to find out again. Again, this is 15 years since I've done this. But I believe it goes out here to a sign for Carball Run, and then we got to go to the left. Carball Run is to the right and goes down in the hollow between Mount Newman and Snaggy Ridge. But where we want to go is across the ridge to the top of it. So we're going to head out this way and see what we can find. So what is the significance of Snaggy Ridge? The Snaggy Ridge is where the Indians mined Rhyolite for 11,000 years. Now, it was all started right after the end of the Ice Age, around 10,000 BC, and they've been mining it for 11,000 years, starting around 9,500 BC. Now, when they come here and they mine the Rhyolite, at that time, they most likely were just picking it up off the ground. But later on, they began to actually physically mine it. So actually going in and digging holes and finding the Rhyolite and producing it. And they would use it to make spear points and axes and other tools to facilitate their life because they were Stone Age people. And he did this for, like I said, 11,000 years up until about the time the Europeans showed up because they started to trade with them and they were getting metal, guns, things like that. So they didn't need arrowheads, spear points, stone tools. But before that, this is a significant place for the Indians because they needed that material to survive. So here is a sign that I want to show you. So it says, welcome to Carball Run Natural Area. This area protects critical habitat and archaeological sites. Soil disturbance and removal of rocks or artifacts is illegal. If you observe such activity, please call. So this whole ridge is actually protected as a type of archaeological site. They did studies here back in the 80s and 90s, I believe, and they were digging around. It was led by the Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission by a man named Kurt Carr, Dr. Kurt Carr, by the way. And they came in and they were digging around trying to figure out what the Indians did and how they did it and all that. And we will cover that here as I go along. But it is a protected site. If you do come here, remember you're not allowed to take any rocks. You're not allowed to disturb any of the sites. You can look at them, but you're not allowed to actually remove them. Now, I also should suggest if you come here, to come here on a Sunday, because this area is a hunting area. It is, there's sections of it that is protected, but not necessarily protected for animals. So we've seen a lot of activity up here dealing with hunting. So Sunday is the best time to do it because hunting does not occur on Sunday usually in Pennsylvania. And then also in the fall is another good time to do it, which is the reason why I'm doing it here in November, because you're going to be crawling through rocks and snakes could be plentiful. But in the cold autumn weather, snakes tend to not move very fast. So and one reason why I'm here alone is because I mentioned the fact that there are rattlesnakes, and I don't think anybody would join me. But anyway, we will continue our trek down here and see if we can find the Rhyolite quarries. So there is a fork in the road here. If I recall correctly, again, this has been 15 years, the right goes down into the hollow at Carball Run, and the left goes across Snaggy Ridge. So I believe we're going to go to the left. Now, Carball Run actually is significant too because the Indians actually would camp down there. There was an Indian camp along that run down in that hollow. And it is largely protected because of that said Indian village or camp or whatever that was down there. But important, even though that's important, really important is actually the Snaggy Ridge itself with the mines on top of it. But you got to walk out across it to get to it, because the mines tend to be on the rocks, where the rocks are out towards the end. So it's a little bit of a trek to get there. It's about 1.5 miles to the edge of the ridge, is how I calculated it, and it's about a 3-mile round trip by the time you get back to your truck at the parking lot. But we're going to continue along our little path here. Eventually, I believe it disappears, at least it did 15 years ago. So we will find out what it actually will do. But yes, so Snaggy Ridge, which I just lost my trail because it's down a tree, but we'll go around it. But Snaggy Ridge is extremely significant because of the mine on the mine that mined Rhyolite. Rhyolite is a volcanic rock. So what the importance of that rock is it's extremely hard. It was formed about 6 million years ago, or 600 million years ago, when this whole area was extremely volcanic. And what it did was it created a rock called basalt, which you still find deposits in the lowlands around here. But the basalt eventually turned into Rhyolite, which is a very hard and dense rock, and would last very well as a spear point. But it was extremely hard to work or knap. So what the Indians would do is, in order to make a spear point, they would use a process called knapping. So knapping, they would take another rock and essentially hit the rock that they're trying to work, and knock flakes off of it, and that would make it sharp on the one side, and it would also shape it into points or whatever they needed it to be. The napping process was used for thousands of years and still is today, since there's a lot of napping enthusiasts to make arrowheads. It's actually considered a modern art today. But anyway, back to the rhyolite. It was formed about 600 million years ago, and then deposited here about 250 million years ago. You had a lot of movement in the earth, and it was created mountain building, so it pushed it all up into here. There was some sediment involved, which eventually was pressurized, turned into quartz, which you'll see quartz deposits along the ridge as well. But a large portion of the rocks here are actually rhyolite, so you can actually see them right there. This is all rhyolite rocks, and the mountain is littered with them. But these are what the early Paleo Indians would have went after around 9,500 BC. They would have just most likely picked them up off the ground. But as time went on and the Indians got more and more sophisticated, they learned that the easiest rhyolite to nap is actually the stuff that's under the ground. So they designed an idea or a way to mine it and then dig it out. And that would make the more superior point. And that's what they were after, of course, was easier way to do something, but still have the hard material that will last forever, or last for a long time at least, and then they can reuse over and over and over again. Just like we want tools today. We don't want to buy cheap tools that are going to break. We want tools that are going to last. So we buy the best steel or the best material to do so. So, and that's the same concept they were doing also. So my little road that I had right here has disappeared. So I'm going to have to trek on foot. Like I said, the road only went so far. So now we're going to go in that direction, which should be due north, and see if we can get to the edge of the rhyolite mines. So let's go down here so we don't have to go through so much underbrush, and we'll go from there. Now, when the Indians first started mining up here, well, gathering rhyolite, it was around 9,500 BC, like I said. Again, they were probably going around just picking up rocks around and then trying to flint nap them or nap them and turn them into tools. But according to Dr. Kurt Carr, who I talked to about 15 years ago when I did my paper, he said in Pennsylvania around that time, which is the Paleo period, there's probably only 100 Indians or 100 people walking around at any given time in Pennsylvania. Most of the time they were nomadic. So there wasn't a whole lot of activity here. But then later on, as you got into the Archaic period, especially the middle, the late, and the terminal Archaic period, which is anywhere between 6,000 and 800 BC, they actually physically started to mine them. So what they did was they would dig down into the ground. Now rhyolite forms itself into basically blocks. They're almost square. They're about 2 foot by 2 foot square, and then about 4 foot long, and they're always sitting vertical in the ground. If you ever look up like basalt or rhyolite pillars on the internet, it's the same phenomenon that creates this. Basically where it stands up, and it was volcanic activity coming up through tubes, and it created these cylindrical type objects. But anyway, they're usually buried about 6 feet in the ground. But the Indians found out that if you dig this out and you break pieces off of these, the moisture of the ground actually helped ease the napping process. So the material was easier to work with than if you just grabbed it off the ground. So they decided that in best interest that they should dig it up and then take chunks off of those blocks and work those and nap those into tools. So when you go around Snaggy Ridge, there's actually a lot of holes, deep impressions everywhere. And a lot of people say, oh, they're probably sinkholes. Well, up here, some of them might be sinkholes, but a lot of them are actually divots where they dug down to get these rectangular blocks of Rhyolite. So here is a good example. So in front of me is a hole. You see it right here. That is actually, and most likely, a divot left over from the mining process by the Indians. And what they would do is they would go down into the ground and they would dig down in, usually with some sort of hoe designed by, or from like an elk shoulder bone of some sort. And they would dig down in these holes and they would find the top of these blocks. Now usually the blocks had hard pan clay around them, so then they would use the same tooling, these or the elk bones, in order to go down in between, and then they would use wedges, stone wedges, levers, wooden levers of some sort maybe, to pry them out of the ground. And then they would break off sections of them, some sort of nodule or a piece of it, and then they would take it on this mountain and they would usually nap it down or beat it down to smaller chunks of material that they wanted to take and back to their village and work there. Now a lot of the villages and camps, especially in Carball Run, there's also a good example in Emmett Springs in Greencastle, Pennsylvania, where they find a lot of rhyolite chippings laying everywhere. Well, what that was from was they would remove the rhyolite from here, they would break it down into smaller sections, and then they would take them to their camps in bags or shoulder bags or pouches or whatever, and then they would work them there turn them into axe heads or spear points or whatever they were trying to build at the time or whatever they were trying to make. So a lot of the chippings that you see in these area, or especially even in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States, a lot of these chippings are rhyolite that as they were making material, they would in their camps they would produce these chips. So just immediately walking up a little up over the hill here, there's another pit. I mean, you can see it, how the contours here. That is another example of an aged pit where the Indians would have mined their rhyolite. And like I said, this whole ridge is dotted with these types of pits. A lot of them are filling in with debris that you can't see them. And of course, when they fill in with all the debris, they eventually get lost because the dirt fills them in and stuff. So they're harder and harder to find every single time you come up here, usually, especially the leaf litter and everything. But you can still find them every so often. Now, rhyolite, it was this whole mine is actually very sacred to me, very important. It was so important that it was considered a communal area. So no matter what tribe you were from, you were allowed to access this because it was a gift from the Great Spirit, and the Great Spirit wanted everybody to have it because he needed it for survival. So that is under the religious aspect of it. They revered this mountain as a gift. So if there was any kind of wars between two tribes and two rival Indian tribes or Indians from different tribes come here, they were not allowed to participate in war activity here. This was kind of like their honor code, which the Native Americans actually had a very good honor code. A lot of peer pressure. That was kind of how they pushed their laws. So they didn't have a lot of written rules and regulations, but they had standards that everybody had to live up to. And because of that, they all respected each other to a certain degree. Now, there is some evidence that this may have been controlled at one point, according to Dr. Carr. But in general, it was usually considered kind of like the Kentuckian hunting grounds. It was a gift from the Great Spirit, and thus everybody had the right to use it. And if you look out across here, you can see we're getting more and more rocks. So we're getting more and more out to the rocky side and out to the outcroppings where you're going to see the processing stations. So the Indians, after they would dig up these blocks of rhyolite, and then they would take basalt hammerstones or some sort of other hammerstone, and then they would break pieces off of them. But usually them pieces were still too big to carry to their camps, which could be all over the place. So they would go to what was called a processing station, which is usually a rock outcropping. They would sit out there and they would chip away at these nodules that they took off these rocks to make them into smaller pieces, so they can easily put them in a knapsack or carry them in a leather pouch, and walk them to their village where they can then work on them. But like I said, the moisture content in the ground is what made it easy to work with. That's why they were digging rather than just picking it off the ground. As you can see, there's a lot of rocks on the ground that you could be digging off of too. But they weren't easy to knap because the moisture content made the rock on the ground way more easier to work and to knap. So then they would take that and they would dig that up rather than try to use this. But you had a period of time after so long, if you didn't work that and put it into or turn it into a tool, that rhyolite would actually become hard again, and then it would be hard to work. So the idea is you dug it out of the ground so it was easier to work. You worked it as soon as you could, and you turned it into a tool, and then as you used the tool, it would dry, and then it would become hard and very durable, and it would last a long time. Which, if you spend hours on making a stone tool by beating another rock against it, of course you want it to last a long time. Otherwise, it's kind of, you'll be doing nothing but flint knapping all the time. So I'm almost to the edge of the ridge, and I haven't seen an outcropping yet with chippings. I know they're here because I've seen them before, but the problem is if you walk in a straight line, you could miss them. So, and I don't have a whole lot of help here to spread out and try to find them. So I'm going to walk to the edge of the ridge and see what I can find, and then I might start back and see if I can blunder into one. The ridge is big. It is probably a half-mile wide, so that's a lot of area to cover. But we'll see what we can do. Maybe I'll get lucky, because at least I hope so, for your sake. Oh, so here, this is cool. Here's another one of these pits. So, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there are divots all around here. So here's one right here. And then there's one. And now I'm going to walk in this one. And there's another one over there, and then one right there. Now some of these may be sinkholes, but not all of them. A lot of them are these divots created by Indians digging around for their precious rhyolite. There's another divot. Let's go over to these rocks over there, see what might be over there. Usually these chippings are next to a series of big rocks. They use them for shade, and they use them for keeping out of the weather and the rain, hopefully the sun's not in your eyes. So let's go over here. All right. This was most likely a process station. So I think we found one. If you look at all them chips right there, see them? That is an Indian process station. So, try not to fall. I don't want to fall. But yeah, this is definitely an Indian process station. So if you look And again, right here's big rock. So it's an outcropping. There's more big rocks. There is outcroppings. Now, so what they would do is they would sit here and they would take their hunks of rock, the rhyolite that they gathered up, and they broke off of the big pieces. They would bring them here and they would actually work on them with hammer stones, and then they would bust them down into smaller pieces. So if you see all these flakes here, which let me turn the camera around for you. So if you see all these flakes, they are not natural. They are not supposed to be here like this by nature. If you look, see how thin that is? And they're flaking those off on that rock to thin it down so they can make it into some sort of stone tool. So if you notice, all these flakes are flat of some sort, broken off, chips. See, here's a cool looking one. Got some lines in it. But yeah, this is definitely an Indian process station. Man, I'm glad we found this. I wasn't sure it was. I was trampling all over this mountain. I didn't see anything yet. I was like, man, I hope I find something. Otherwise, this ain't gonna work. But I'm glad I stumbled onto it. Actually, this is a different one than what I seen the last time. I'm gonna walk up here a little further up the ridge and see if I can find another one. And if I do, I do. If I don't, we might have to just call it a day. But we'll go take a look, see what I can find. Here's more divots in the ground. Gotta duck through some of these trees. All right, whoop, almost fell. So here's another one. This is another Indian processing facility right next to here. If you can see, there's this big rock and they use it as a shelter. Keep blocks from the wind, the rain, things like that. And if you look very closely, there are chippings. So let's take a look at them, shall we? So there you go. More chippings. I'm trying to find the big pile, which actually there might be some up here. There's a big rock up here, and we're going to see what's on the other side of that rock. So you don't know. So, as you see, that rock has been here for a while. So has all of these. Why? Because they're weathered. They're pitted. That one there has got a lot of moss growing on it. They're pitted, they're weathered, they're discolored. But then you have these right here, and if you look at them, they're a lot lighter, they're a lot brighter, and they're a lot cleaner. And that most likely means that they haven't been out in the weather as long. Now, of course, they've been out of the weather for a long time, but not as long as, say, this rock. Now, this one here is interesting because if you look at it, it's flat on the one side. So see how flat it is right there, and then it's chipped off. Now, most likely, as I said before, these things came in block form. They were a 2 foot by 2 foot, roughly 2 foot by 2 foot square, at 4 foot long. So it was a rectangle that they dug out of the ground. They were almost flat on all sides. So if you look at this, it is extremely flat. And if you look, it's a lot lighter on the outside than it is on the other side. And I bet you that this here was a chipping off of one of the rocks they dug out. Now, this might not have necessarily been a small processing station. This might have been where they were digging them out, because there is a pit right there. So they might have busted this off the side of that block and decided they couldn't use it for anything. So they just tossed it here. So again, here you go. As you can tell, there's not quite as weathered as some of these other rocks that are around here. They're very small. They have angles to them, which means that they were being knocked off or flaked off of something. Here's another one. There's one right there. So we're going to stop for a little rest here, but I will take the time to explain a little bit about trade. So the Indians, again, like I said, 9,500 BC started mining here. They started really getting into the digging process and processing process probably around anywhere between 6,000 and 1,000 BC. And then they came out here. Of course, they dig it up, they bring it here, they chip it down to whatever size they want, and they take it back to their camps. Now, there is evidence that this material was traded, because they have found rhyolite that came from this ridge all over the Mid-Atlantic region, up into New York, down into North Carolina, the whole way to the Delmarva Peninsula. So they find arrowheads, especially the Susquehanna broadhead or broad point. They find them, and they were primarily made from rhyolite, and most of them came from the rhyolite from here. Now, this area is actually the largest deposit of rhyolite in the Mid-Atlantic region. There is some others, but this is the biggest, and it seemed like the Indians found out about it relatively quickly, most likely because they were moving down a game trail, which cuts through the mountain here, South Mountain, at Caledonia. That was a big game trail. They probably stumbled by this thing, chasing deer and various other animals moving in between the mountains. And then they stumbled upon this, and they were able to find out the secrets of using the rhyolite. Around the terminal Archaic period, which would have been around 800 BC to 1800 BC, I believe, they started developing canoes. So the canoes allowed them to transport the rhyolite as far as the water can take them. And then they would trade it. So they might need a different type of material from a different location. So they would go to a different tribe or a different group of people, and they would trade this rhyolite or their tools that they made with them in order to get something different. Hence the reason why there is so much rhyolite all over the Mid-Atlantic region that comes from Snaggy Ridge. Now, as we got into the woodland periods, which would be after the birth of Christ, so it would be in this side, not in BC, it would be on this side of things, around, I think, 500 AD, the Indians developed arrows. So before that, they were just using spear points. We always think, bows and arrows for Indians. They didn't have bows and arrows. In the BC times. They actually had spear points, and a lot of times they had spears with atlatls. They would throw them with extra leverage with an atlatl. Then when they started developing the bow, they still needed rhyolite, but instead of making the big broad spear points, they made little arrowheads, and then they would put them on shafts and all that stuff. Now, basically, they mined this up until around 1700. Why? Because you were having trade with the Europeans. The Europeans had steel. So they were making metal spear points, metal tomahawks, metal tools. They were trading with the Indians, and the Indians preferred that. And they were still hunting with bows and arrows, but they started to prefer black powder rifles and muskets. And that's what they were using to hunt. Then as the 1700s moved on, you had more and more encroachment or movement onto the lands of the Indians by the settlers, and the settlers started to inhabit this area, which basically cut off the Indians from this sacred ground. They still were able to access it if they wanted to, but they didn't really need to. So it eventually just died off in the woodland period, and around 1700 is about when the activity on here ceased. So most likely the chippings that we're seeing is not from, the Archaic period or the Paleo period or whatever. They're most likely from the woodland period because they're younger and they're around. We're able to sustain it here a lot longer. The other ones are probably buried under dirt, that the sediment that's built up over the years from leaf litter and things like that. Oh, look at this. I think I found a big kahuna.